Today's the day. Let's make this thing a roller. Here we are working on the 1966 Shovelhead again. If you watched the last video, you watched me install these neck cups. So that was the first thing I did on this. Now I've got all the parts clean. I've got the front end ready to go. I've got my bearings, the top one sitting in, the bottom one is pressed onto the steering stem itself. One of the concerns that I have is I am missing the neck lock here. I do have one. I'm not sure how these install. So I'm not sure exactly how to get this thing in here. So I need to do a little more online research to get that figured out. But I figured today, let's throw some wheels on this thing, get it on the lift, get it sitting pretty proper, and see how that goes. As I said, I've got my top bearing sitting in the cup here. I greased it and I put it in the cup. I just want to keep it safe. I do have my bottom bearing greased, and that's all set inside the steering stem here with the triple tree. So I'm going to grab my parts here. We're going to get the lower tree on, and we'll get our top tree on, and we'll get everything kind of buttoned up. All right, first things first, we're going to take our lower tree here, and we're going to slide it into place. I'll take my top dust cover too. That way I can kind of keep the bearing in place. I know it's going to make a giant mess. As you can see, it made quite the mess here. Okay, we've got our lower tree installed. The bearing did fight me a little bit. I had to actually finish the surface of the steering stem itself. It was a little rough and the bearing did not want to sit all the way down, so I had to sand that down a little bit, clean it up because it had some burrs on it. Now I've got everything seated together. There's actually a top lock nut. I'm not sure what these are called. I also know that there's a tool for this, and I don't have it, unfortunately. So I'm just going to put this on the best way that I know how. And unfortunately, these things are very gnarly, and they do, chew up your hands when you put them on. So I'm going to use a set of channel locks here. I'm going to thread this in place. Okay, now that we have the top nut on, I think it's called a castle nut. Could be the locking nut. I don't really remember. It's called a castle nut on a Springer front end, as far as I remember. I'm not exactly sure what they call it on this. Next, you'll put your upper triple tree on. Also, there is a lock washer that goes on that, and there are 3 tabs on the top of the triple tree here. So we'll put this in place. We will then put our lock washer on, and then there's also a top nut that goes on that. So we'll thread that into place. All right, I've taken the frame and I've shifted it off of the table to give myself a little bit of working room. I've also put a ream of paper, or whatever the heck these things are called, a box of copy paper, onto the frame as a counterweight. I don't have any good way to hold this up on the table, and if I strapped it, I would have to strap it to the table, and I wouldn't be able to cantilever it off of the table to be able to put the fork legs in. So I put a weight on the back just to kind of hold this thing in place, and now I'll go ahead and put the forks in. Also, one of the things I've done is I've actually gone ahead and greased these up, the lower tree and the top tree here. Just a little bit of grease to help lubricate everything and make it move a little freer. We'll start with the right side leg first. Removing the top cap here. With the top cap out of the way, we should be able to fish this in. Like I said, I left this top loose a little bit so I could make everything work. All right, couple of things. I've got both of the legs on now. There are a few things to do. There's a rubber grommet that goes in the top here. I'm going to insert that first. Then there's a washer, which is like a spacer, that goes on your top nut here. So those go together and thread that in. I've already done the other side. I didn't show that. Thought it might be a good idea to at least show you what I'm working with and kind of how that works. In case you've never taken one of these apart or put one together, just some of the things that you need to have with it. I'll snug those up in a minute here. On the back side of the triple tree, there are 2 pinch bolts. These are actually an ARP stud, so they're a 12-point stud. They're not normally that way, but that's what I have on this. So I'm going to go ahead and snug those up real quick. Now the pinch bolts are snugged in place. We'll go ahead and tighten down these caps. One of the things to keep in mind is when you're snugging down these caps, make sure that the tubes are all the way into the front triple trees. Before you tighten the pinch bolts, I did tighten the pinch bolts first, but I knew I had these shoved in all the way as far as they would go. Now I'm going to clean off this excess grease. Not that it makes a whole lot of difference being on there, because this is going to get covered with a nacelle and you won't even see it. I want to go ahead and cover this up or clean this up a little bit. Do you ever just stand back and look at your project and go, wow, this is coming together great. But wait, something is missing here. What did I forget? Maybe you've already seen it, and maybe you're already laughing at me. And you should be, because I'm laughing at me. Now I know I'm going to run a full nacelle on this, and obviously there should be something here. And sometimes, you forget things along the way, and I did not lay this out as well as I should have before I started working on it. So I have these cowbells that go in place here, and I totally spaced and forgot them. So now I'm going to take this thing back apart and then put the cowbells on and then put it back together. I guess practice makes perfect, right? When you're dealing with a project, there should be some sort of operational order that you should be following. Either laying all the tools out, laying all the parts out, getting a good idea in your mind, writing down the steps in order to put these things together. Unfortunately, I'm doing this all from memory, and I did not take everything out, and these were not where I needed them to be. I left them on a different front end. I knew I was going to run these ones, but I totally forgot about them. And when I put these legs on, I stood back and looked and thought, yep, I'm missing something here. And then remembered, I did not take these off yet. So anyway, I'm going to take this apart and we'll put it back together. All right, with our front end installed, it's time to work on the front wheel. Now again, I know I don't have this thing braced and it's kind of haphazardly on the bench. I do have a couple of lifts here, so they are in place, and I do have the tires sitting here right now. What I need to do next is I need to put my counterweight back onto the frame here. I need to lift the lifts up in order to be able to get the front wheel in place. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my counterweight, I'm going to put that back on the bike, and then I'm going to slowly work the jacks up a little bit at a time so I can get this into the proper position to be able to mount this tire or this wheel assembly onto these front forks. Now that I've got everything lifted up in the air and pretty close, the wheel is still loose in the front cycle vise here. I've got everything kind of balanced. I know this is going to be a delicate process. What I'm going to do next is install my axle. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to grease up the axle a little bit here. I'm obviously going to remove all of the hardware from it, and that way I can guide this thing through. Okay, now that I have a little bit of lubricant on my axle here, I'm going to go ahead and start trying to fish this thing in. I have to install my wheel spacer on the other side, so I have the proper spacing here. So this is where it's going to get a little intense. Now gently guide this thing through. With the axle all the way in place, we'll put the hardware on and we'll snug things up a little bit. We'll go ahead and tighten up our axle cap here. All right, now that we have the axle cap tightened up, we're going to go ahead and tighten up the nut on this side, securing everything in place. Now that our front end is buttoned up, we're actually going to slide the wheel in the cycle vise to its correct position. And I'm going to gently move everything to the right side of the table here, trying not to knock anything off the bench. With that, we'll tighten down the vise. And with our vise tightened down, everything is mostly secure. I can go ahead and level this thing out and get ready to work on the back end of this bike. Now I'm sure many of you remember I rebuilt the swing arm for this bike. Now that I have it rebuilt, it's ready to be installed. What I need to do next is I need to take my swing arm bolt, and of course I need to put a little grease on that. That way everything slides in nicely. With our swing arm bolt greased up, I'm going to guide this in place. All of my bushings and everything are already installed, so I just need to get this in its proper spot here. With all new bushings, fresh paint, new bearings and everything, it does fit a little tight, so we're going to go ahead and guide it in with a rubber mallet. Now that I have the swing arm bolt all the way to the other side, I'm going to slowly start threading this in. Now on this side of the bike, there's a spot where the lock tab goes in place, and I want to make sure that's right in the right spot before I thread this all the way in. So I'm going to push that in first. The excess grease actually holds that clip in place very nicely, so I'm going to utilize that while I thread this in the rest of the way. Now I'm not ready to put the rear fender on this yet, so I'm going to temporarily mock up the rear end. But I do want this to be a roller, so I'm going to put shocks on and all that good stuff. So the next step is going to be installing upper and lower shock mounts on these. Now, if you don't know, the shock mounts for these shovel heads are two different lengths. Obviously, this would be your upper shock mount and this is your lower shock mount. We'll get the hardware out of the way to show you the difference. So you can see the size difference here between the upper and lower. So we'll go ahead and we'll push our lowers in place first. Then we'll push our uppers in place next. Of course, there's a nylock nut for the back side here. We'll temporarily start that on the top and then again on the bottom. And then, of course, to tighten these up, it's a 3/4 inch on the outside and a 15/16 on the inside. Now I'm running into a little bit of a problem here. The spacers that I have here are not quite wide enough to take up the slack for this frame, so they are a little loose. But like I said, I'm going to take this apart eventually anyway when I put the fender back on. These are going to have to come back out, so I'll have to get an adapter or a spacer at that point in time. We'll go ahead and snug up the bottom here real quick, and then we'll repeat the process on the other side. All right, next up we need to focus on shocks. Now when it comes to shocks, there are these washers, and they're a metal washer, and there is an inner and an outer. So your inners are usually a little bigger on the inside diameter than the outers, and that's because of the makeup of the studs here. Obviously this one hits flush right to this shoulder, and the other one hits flush right to the back side of the nut there. So we'll start on this side first. We'll put our inner on first, and of course the bottoms are the same thing. All right, I have gone ahead and I've greased all of my surfaces. That way everything will play nicely and the shock will slide on smoothly. Okay, now that the shock is in place, we'll put our outers on. We'll dress up things a little bit nicely. And for now, I only have the top nuts. I don't have the bottom ones. I'm going to have to source a set. Unfortunately, I don't have them today. But this will get me going for now. We'll show you the process kind of up close and personal so you can see what I'm doing. Like I said, there's an inner and outer cap. This is your inner because it's got a larger inner diameter. This is your outer, smaller diameter. This one will go on first. And because of the shock makeup, I'm actually going to take the inner here and I'm going to set it onto the shock. And this will allow me to guide everything together in one shot and not fight it. Of course, now we'll put on our outer. All right, I have my rear wheel in place. I did go ahead and install the drum brake on this. I didn't figure I needed to film that. You guys have probably seen, a drum brake go onto a Star Hub wheel a million times. Obviously, this is a juice drum on this bike. With the taller shocks and the taller front end, the bike does sit up quite a bit higher. So I'm going to have to go ahead and lift the jack a little bit in order to get this thing in place. So I'm going to gently take my time, lifting the jack slowly. That way I can guide the wheel into the right spot. Now that I've got the jack in the right location, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move the backing plate of the drum into its proper spot here. There's a bolt that goes on the bottom tab here on the swing arm. I still need to go up just a little bit further with the jack. Now that I have everything situated here with the rear wheel, you can see that the lower mount is in place, that the sleeve here is in place. So there's a washer that goes on next, and then there's an outer nut that goes on. We'll go ahead and we'll just gently snug these things up. This stuff is not permanent. This, like I said, we're just mocking this thing up for right now. It'll probably come back apart maybe one more time. I'm not sure just yet. All right, looking at the other side of the bike, obviously there's a huge gap here. Now there's a spacer that's made for that, and that fits in between the wheel itself and the swing arms. We'll go ahead and get that in next. These are always kind of a pain to put in. I know that there's probably a better way to do it, but I'm going to fish this in as best as possible. Okay, with the spacer in place, we'll go ahead and we'll slide the axle in. This one's already pre-greased. This one's ready to slide through. There are two notches on the axle. There's a top and a bottom flat spot. Hopefully you can pick those up in there. And those actually ride right in the channel of the swing arm here. Very similar on the hardtail models. As you can see, that brings the nut right close to the edge of the swing arm here. And then there's one more nut that goes on the other side. This is actually a nylock. We'll go ahead and we'll put that on, so that way everything's kind of buttoned up for now. And with that, we've got the rear wheel mounted. Let's move the camera here. We'll walk around the bike and we'll talk about some of the features that are on this motorcycle and give you kind of the direction of what I'm going with. Okay, let's start with the front of the motorcycle. Obviously, I'm running a dual 16-inch front and rear wheel. The front wheel is a single disc off a later model Shovelhead. Those are 2-over tubes, so it gives it a little bit of a stance. I am running Shinko tires, a black set of hubs, and stainless steel spokes. Now, if you remember a couple videos ago, I did vapor hone both of the hubs. That was for this bike. So those hubs have been vapor honed. They've been gutted. They've been re-gutted, or everything's been put back inside, and now they're all set. From there, we're going with the 1966 Shovelhead frame. This is a stock frame. It has been altered a little bit, not much, and I'll show you those alterations as we go through. I don't plan on changing anything on the frame. I want it to be just like it is, and that's the plan. To the rear of the bike, we're still running the stock round swing arm. I have opted for 14.5-inch shocks. Now this gives this bike a very tall stance, and that's kind of what I was going for. Something a little different. Everybody else has got a low motorcycle. I've got low motorcycles and I like them. I wanted this one to be a little bit taller. In the rear of the bike, we're running the same Shinko rear tire, black hoop, stainless steel spokes, star hub wheel. Of course, this is a juice or a hydraulic drum rear brake. That's what I'll use for the rear. The alterations that have been made to the frame, you can see that there's a mount that was built there. That's for a floorboard. I did not want to take that thing off. This was done years ago. This bike has been this way. I'm only kind of putting my own personal flair on it, and I'm not changing anything major. I do not currently have a caliper for this. I'm not sure what I'm going with yet. I may get an adaptive bracket and then run something a little more modern. I also don't have the hardware for the rotor, so that one is just sitting in place for now, and that's where it'll be until I buy the proper hardware. Let's talk about ground clearance. You can see how tall that this bike is. It sets up very high. From the table to the bottom of the frame is 8.5 inches. It's a lot taller than it was. When I had this bike originally, it was pretty much sitting on the pavement. The difference being it had, I think, 2 under tubes, and the rear shocks were absolutely blown out. One of them was bent so bad that it no longer moved and was fully compressed. So when I took this thing apart, the one shot apart and the other one stayed in place. Those were a 12.5 inch, or actually they were a 13-inch shock. One of them was only 11 inches. Well, friends, this has been a fun one. It's great to see this bike back as a roller. Now, I've been accumulating parts for this thing for a little while and kind of deciding on a direction to go. It's going to be a mix of some modern, newer things and some ratty parts. Obviously, my shocks are not the nicest looking shocks, but I don't want this bike to be some show queen. I really like the dirty style, so I'm going to keep this thing kind of looking gross with some shiny parts on it too. I'm not exactly sure if I'm going to change the original primary that I had on there. I may get a more modern one that is new chrome, so it looks a little nicer. Since the engine has been vapor honed, the transmission has been vapor honed, and all those parts look really good. Obviously, with the clean front end, there's some things I'd like to clean up on this bike. I do want to polish the nacelle for this, so that way it does look as nice as the rest of the parts, and I hope that doesn't leave me with the rest of everything else looking kind of crappy. Well, friends, if you like this video, give it a like, give it a thumbs up. I appreciate you guys watching to the end of it. I know this is kind of a weird one. I was all over the place. I struggled with some stuff. I mean, you can see some of the pitfalls that come with putting these things together, especially when you're working alone. Maybe you don't have the right tools, or maybe some of these parts are going to fight you and you'll see the struggles. Or maybe you didn't lay your parts out right and you forgot something along the way and had to go back through and redo it. I do it too many times. This is the part where this bike is going to start taking off and you're going to see it take shape. So if you're not subscribed yet, you're going to want to hit that subscribe button. You know, this is a cool project that I'm excited to get done. And once this engine is done, the rest of this bike is going to fly. I do have the tin set back. It is painted, but I'm not quite ready to show it to you yet. It turned out amazing. And once I get ready to have it to that point, I'll bring that in, I'll show you that, and that will really set this bike apart from the rest. Anyway, friends, that's it for this one. I'll catch you next time.